Good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Chris Marty, and I am with the Metal Service Center Institute, and I want to welcome you to what represents the fourth in our series of quarterly safety webinars in conjunction with Optimum Safety Management. This webinar today is about the team approach to safety. So welcome. Before we get into the content of the webinar, I wanted to just go over a couple of housekeeping items. One is that I'd like to make sure that you all know that you can ask questions of Steve Yates, who is our presenter today, and you can do so anytime by using the GoToWebinar interface. And you can ask a question in the chat area. There is a chat channel that I can see, and I can monitor your questions, or there's actually a question channel that you can ask questions in, and we will have time for Q&A at the end of the session. So we'll do about 45 minutes of content and then about 15 or so minutes of Q&A. So if you do think of a question while Steve is going through his material, please go ahead and ask it, and we'll get it asked for you toward the end of the session. So before we get started, let me introduce Steve. Steve is the president and founder of Optimum Safety Management. Steve's company is also a very good partner of ours here at the Metal Service Center Institute. Steve has spoken at our safety conference for the last few years. Steve offers these quarterly webinars through MSCI, and Optimum Safety Management also hosts our safety helpline, which has been very useful for members who need to get expert safety advice but don't really have anywhere else to turn to. So we want to thank Steve for all of that. And I want to welcome Steve. And Steve, with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to you to start the program today.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. And it's great to be back here on yet another of our quarterly webinars with just the great members at MSCI. We're so thankful to be able to partner with the association and provide a valued service to the members. We've enjoyed a really nice attendance at these, and we're getting some great feedback from the membership about the value of them. So it's great to see that being received, and that all goes along with commitment to safety and trying to drive that commitment through the membership as well, and see the member companies grow in their endeavors to create a safer and more healthful workplace for their employees. So we're just real appreciative of being able to be a part of that. The topic today that we're going after is the team approach to safety. And this is a great topic for me. It's one that's near and dear to my heart as we try to build effective safety management systems within our client organizations. And what I want to do is just begin with a bit of an overview today as we get started, and just talk about safety management and team approach to safety, what it is, but what it's not as well. And when we talk about effective safety management, many of us that are on the call and many that were on this morning's webinar as well, we're working within organizations that are running at Mach 5. They're high-level production environments that create a lot of productivity. There's a lot of things happening, a lot of high hazards within those work environments. So what we've wanted to try and produce is a method of getting safety integrated into those environments so that they can continue to run at Mach 5 and be highly productive, but at the same time be highly safe and safety conscious as well. And what you're going to see today is our team approach to safety. This is a proprietary approach that Optimum has developed coming out of actually the economic downturn. We were faced in 2008 with a number of our client companies that came to us and said, you know, we have internal safety resources, people that we've had full-time on our staff, and because of the economy, we're not able to support those salaries. We're having to downsize, and many of you have worked at organizations that were downsizing and reducing staff and headcounts and so on. And they got to the point where some of their safety staff had to go, and they were very concerned because they didn't want to lose their commitment to safety. More importantly, they didn't want to lose their safety culture. So they came to us and they said, hey, how can we maintain a safety culture while we're reducing our staff and actually eliminating our safety professionals? And out of that was born our team approach to safety. We've always known that it's a good idea to get safety integrated across the organization and so on, but we had to get very tactical about it coming into that economic downturn because companies just didn't have the resources, and they had to stretch every dollar they had as far as they possibly could. So that's basically what we're going to be talking about today, is how do we build safety into the entire organization so that everybody is operating in a safe manner and thinking about safety first and foremost. What you're not going to hear about today, what this is not about, is waxing on safety. I get fairly nauseated when I walk into an organization that is talking a good game and saying that they're doing a lot about safety, but yet when we start to check under the hood, we find out that only half the cylinders are firing, or maybe it just looks like the engine's running, but there's nothing really going on. There's nothing worse than saying we're going to do something and doing something totally opposite. So what we're going to help you with today is let's blow that out of the water, let's get that out of the way, and let's actually build something that's effective. We're going to give you some tangible tools today to do that with. So why bother, though, right? Why bother? We've got a productive environment, operating environment that's producing product or steel or fabrications or whatever it is that we're doing. We're pushing a lot of steel out the door at our service center. Why bother worrying about this? And some of you on the phone right now are probably looking at the phone like, what's this guy talking about? Of course we need to bother about this. And that's a great attitude. But I would say not everybody on this call today is working at a company that values safety very highly. So we want to talk about this a little bit. Why should we bother with this? The obvious answers are compliance and because we don't want to hurt people, right? We have a good moral obligation to safety as people come into our workplace. But we've got to be intentional about this. This is not something that is going to happen in a way that's significant or has impact unless we're very intentional and we set a vision ahead of us for how we're going to do this. About 2 years ago here at Optimum, we were working through the process of setting our corporate mission, purpose, vision statement, value statements, really starting to think about who is it that we are and that we want to be as we continue to grow as an organization and impact more and more companies around the country. And we were working with a consulting team that was challenging me one day on getting our vision statement to be bigger than who we are. What we could see as our impact today, but grow and stretch. What's the next steps? What could we maybe not even grasp a hold of today on how we would get there? But if we could be somewhere 10 years from now and we could impact the environment and change it, what would it look like? And out of that and a number of other conversations came this vision statement where a small consulting firm here in Naperville, Illinois said, we really want to see us impact the culture of the workforce here in the United States and in Mexico and in Canada in a way that workers everywhere are valued and safe. So what does that mean when we talk about valuing a worker? I think about my son going to work within a workplace. Do I value his safety enough that I would make changes or impact things in that workplace? The answer is, of course. I wouldn't want my own flesh and blood, my son, to walk into that workplace and experience some of the hazards that we see when we walk into a client's facility or into a workplace. If that's the case, why would I not value somebody else in that workplace the same way? And that's really what we're talking about here when we talk about value. We want to make sure that we're valuing each of the workers that we have as if they're our own flesh and blood, our own family member, and then that we're going to value them enough that we're going to overcome the financial, work decisions, the thought process redesign, workstation redesign, etc., to keep that valued person safe in their workplace so that they can actually leave there at the end of the day and go home to their family the same way they came in, come back tomorrow and earn a living, but also be a valued employee and a valued asset to our organization on an ongoing basis. Because if we're injuring them, we're having to retrain or replace and so on, and we've negatively impacted that family, that worker, etc. So we want to make sure that we have a vision statement like that in front of us. So that's ours. You're welcome to adopt it for your own. Or the question is, what is yours? And do you have a vision statement that's pulling you along and will allow you to work through the things you'll need to work through to build what we're about to talk about today? We want to make sure, though, that we understand that when we do this, we will have benefits that go beyond just the worker being valued and safe. We'll also have less injury within our workplace. We'll also have better employee engagement. We'll have better employee retention. You know, if you were at the safety conference just recently in Schaumburg, Illinois here, I taught a session on employee orientation. And you might remember that we talked about workers that are better engaged when they begin their work and trained properly, being injured less, they have better engagement and better employee retention. So new hire orientation is the first step as we bring someone in. However, it's not the end. We need to make sure that we understand that once they're oriented and you've told them what's going to happen in your workplace, there needs to be some meat on the bone. There needs to be something behind that curtain that's actually of value so that when they walk through it and they're now in your workplace, they see something that models what you were talking about. Now, if you can do this effectively, which I know you can build this approach and you can have this type of a vision and a workplace that will value your employees. Once you do that, the results of this type of system are proven. What you're seeing here on the screen is one of our clients' case studies where we looked at their workplace when we started working with them, and we see each year, year over year, the reduction in injuries. Their total case incident rate dropped 49% in the first year. That's a significant impact, especially when you look at national average cost per injury. The indirect costs alone are in excess of $100,000 and some. So you can imagine the impact that this kind of an injury rate reduction has on a workplace. And now when you look year 2, 3, 4, 92% reductions. This is amazing results, but what happened here, we engaged the entire workforce. Now, that's the injuries right up front, so the impact to the people, but when you look at the next graph, that's their experience modification rate, which is their workers' compensation rate. That's what results in a direct bottom line impact to the organization in profitability. These impacts are monumental, especially the larger the organization, where we see impacts of up to 37%. Those are amazing also because it's only 0.01 above the industry minimum EMR. So they've left nothing on the table with the work comp carrier. They are now in control of their insurance program, and they command the conversations at renewal time. If the insurance carrier doesn't give them a good enough rate, they have a lot of pull because many companies will want to do business with them. These are huge competitive advantages and benefits for any organization. So what we want to do is lock that information in as we walk through this, because you're going to hear about some things that are going to take some effort to put in place. They are all very worthwhile. So, like with any training session that you're going to deliver to the people in your workforce, what I've just done for you as an adult learner is told you why you need to be involved in this training session and what you're going to get out of it. You need to model that when you're doing training in your workplace, because adult learners need to know. So now after we've had a nice lunch today and everybody's in this session, and instead of dozing off, we're all engaged, right? You can tell I've got a lot of passion about this topic because it's impacted many of our clients in a very positive way. And I just want to bring this to you so that we can impact the environment in your workplace and then help to achieve this vision of workers everywhere valued and safe. So on that note, let's go ahead and get talking about the different approaches to safety management. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk first about the traditional approach. We want to talk about what happens in most workplaces, and like the workplace that I used to work at when I first got involved in safety. So as you look at this diagram, you see a business with 5 different locations. Apply it to yours. Maybe it's 5 departments. Maybe it's 5 states that you operate in, 5 different warehouses. Maybe there's 3 or 4. But you have a group of employees that you're trying to keep safe. In a traditional approach, an employer will hire one safety person. We call him the safety guy. And every employee around the organization that I used to work at, we had 400 employees, 4 different locations, field service crews as well for construction activity. And if you asked any of those employees who was responsible for safety, I would have 400 fingers pointed in my direction. Now that's a lot of weight for one person to carry because they're all worried about production. They're all worried about quality. I'm the one who's responsible for safety. So I turned into the safety cop. Now there's probably people on this call that are relating to that, and it's not comfortable, and I get it. We don't want to be in that spot because when we're the safety cop, we've got to keep walking around writing tickets to get things to happen, and if you're not there, things don't change. Not a very good situation, right? And you end up feeling like you're the odd man out. So when we have this kind of a situation, as I mentioned, the weight of this, much too much to bear, and what happens is safety collapses. There's no way this one person can hold up the safety commitment for all of those people in the environment. It's just not going to work. So when we set people up in this environment, and I'm sorry if you're in this spot today, but when we set people up in this type of an environment, we are setting them up for failure. If this is as far as we go, things are not going to work out. We've got to go next steps. So what I want to talk to you about now, what do those next steps look like? We want to build team approaches to safety, approaches that go across the entire organization. So let's take a look at how we here at Optimum build team approach to safety. What you're looking at right now are the slides that we use when we implement this approach inside of a client organization. So I'm not here to sell you on having Optimum come in and do this. You can replace our name in that box with either your in-house safety professional, maybe you have somebody who's degreed, maybe you're a degreed safety professional, you're certified, you understand hazard recognition, maybe like myself, you took a bunch of additional education. I have a mechanical engineering background, was at a workplace where I was working as a management consultant when OSHA knocked on the door and we couldn't spell safety. That's going back about 18 or 19 years ago now. So I went back through the National Safety Council, took an advanced safety certificate. I went back and took a bunch of additional continuing education classes and retooled my career for safety because I was the dedicated safety professional within the workplace that I had. So however you're going to handle that, whether it's a company like Optimum, whether it's you as the internal, whether you're using some other resource or team of resources to fill that box, every organization that's going to run a safety program needs to have a safety subject matter expert, somebody that can speak to the issues related to safety. If you don't have that, you're going to be at a deficit. You've got to have somebody that can speak to this issue. There's no profession out there like safety that I think gets this kind of an impression where we can take somebody from operations or somebody from HR, we can move them into a safety role, give them the title, pass the wand over them, and then we send them for an OSHA 30-hour course and we think we have a safety professional. You are a safety professional because that's what you're doing for work, but to say that you're qualified for that work is very difficult. We need to make sure that if we're putting people in that position, we get them an adequate amount of training and resources, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do here with the MSCI Association is make sure that the association members have the resources and the knowledge and that they're hearing about these things so they head in the right direction and that their programs become successful. Nothing worse than setting a program up to fail. We're not about that. We want to try and help you in a different direction. So now that we've got the subject matter expert, we need to set the rest of the team up. First thing, safety leadership team. Absolutely critical that we have a group of leaders within the organization who are going to speak to safety and set vision and direction. They're going to learn about it. They're going to study it. They're going to lead it within their organization and set vision and direction for how we're going to move forward with our safety program efforts. So that safety leadership team should be made up of high-ranking company officials. You need somebody from operations, high-ranking, general manager, chief operating officer, somebody that's up in the the upper echelon, maybe in the C level or just below, who's got authority and responsibility that can speak into and make changes related to safety. You need somebody in there from your financial team. Maybe it's a controller, maybe it's an owner, maybe it's a CFO, depending on the size of the organization. But somebody that has check writing ability. So when there's an issue that needs to be taken care of, this team doesn't have to go and sell somebody on the return on investment or the benefit. That person's already been in the room and they've heard about the problem, they've heard about the solution, and they can go and get authorization or be authorized to write the check. So operations, finance, maintenance, very important to have a maintenance representative in that team. If you have problems with overhead cranes or forklifts, etc., that maintenance person, the one that's leading the maintenance department, needs to be accountable to fixing those issues. They need to understand the downstream safety and production impacts. So having somebody from maintenance in that team is essential, as well as human resources. Must have somebody in there that's dealing with our human capital. Got to have somebody that can make differences and impacts and change protocols and help work with union organizations and work with disciplinary action and so on. So it's critical that we pull together the right team. Now, for just a moment, I'm going to take a bit of a sidestep here. This safety leadership team is not a safety committee. There's a lot of organizations that are running safety committees, and that methodology has been around for years. For my opinion, I don't like safety committees because they're a lot like a lot of committees where people sit around in a room and they talk about a lot of things, but not much gets done and there's not much accountability. So we want to focus on leadership and leading in a positive direction with a vision and a mission here within our safety leadership team. Now, if you have a safety committee and it's functioning that way, then don't change it. But if your safety committee is not functioning that way, it might be time for a change. This is not the team to bring frontline folks in and let them sit in it. This is leadership. So it's not something that we want to have diluted or distracted. Second type of team, we want to make sure we have a safety team. So what this is a team of frontline supervisors and key personnel from each production area or department or division. You have to look across your organization and figure out how best to divide this up. But you need to have safety team members who can take the vision from the safety leadership team and carry that out across the organization. They're basically the foot soldiers who are going to go out and with the marching orders and go ahead and carry out that mission. Now, safety administrators. So I like to say that safety saves lives, but it kills trees. Right? Lots of documentation needs to be kept when it comes to safety. OSHA record keeping, training documentation, many different pieces of paperwork, inspections for equipment and vehicles. There's all kinds of things that need to be tracked, as well as OSHA inspections and so on. You need people who can track that. Maybe with the size of your organization that one person is adequate, maybe it requires more than that. But once you have this team together and they're working well together, here's the situation. The goal is to elevate the level of safety around the organization. Take the organization back up again and get it elevated so that the folks that are running your production department can actually operate. Your operations team can actually move and function and keep things going, but not only going, but growing as well. We want to make sure that they're able to move in a better direction. Now, your safety team members are the folks represented in the orange boxes here. As you build a good safety team, you're going to have safety representatives around the organization that have responsibility for safety. They know what the marching orders are. They know what the vision is. They're able to carry it out, but also they're setting a good example. Those folks out on the shop floor need to be the ones that are wearing their safety glasses, hard hats, steel-toe boots. They're setting the example for those around them, and they're cooperative, and they're in the process so they understand it. And as we do that, we're able to then begin building a culture of safety around the organization. We want to wrap the whole organization up in a culture of safety. Now, as that culture begins to build, what happens is these safety team members become the pillars of safety around that organization. They're able to uphold the value of safety in a way that our safety manager or safety director is now a resource for them. Safety becomes part of their job responsibilities. It's part of what they're required to do on a day-to-day basis. It's not a bolt-on or add-on. It's part of. So just like a quality control manager would have supervisors in a department that are watching over measurements and thicknesses and certifications and weld quality and so on, the safety manager has supervisors who are watching over personal protective equipment compliance, housekeeping, electric cord quality and condition, making sure equipment's in the right condition. They're following lockout procedures. There's just too much for one person to be able to handle, so now we have many sets of eyes across the organization. When this type of a system is implemented and it's put in place, and it's in place for a while and it does not take very long, what happens is we begin to see radiating from our safety team members this cultural adoption. The people around them begin to look and see what's going on, and they see their coworker, Joe, who's always been kind of a old-timer. He's done things the same way forever. All of a sudden, he's doing things a little different. That younger guy who's come in and working alongside him now begins to adopt his new methodologies. And we're training up the workforce of tomorrow with a culture of safety built into the organization. The tremendous benefit in this is that if one of these people retires or leaves to go to work somewhere else, when they leave, it leaves a hole in the organization. But it's a small hole. And we've trained up people around them that can step into it and fill the gap and now become that pillar in that area again. And very quickly, you'll find that the organization just carries on, and the culture is part of what we do. It's no longer where we have one safety professional who leaves because he's burned out and goes to work somewhere else, and the entire organization struggles until we get somebody back in place. This, you barely notice when somebody moves out because the next person just steps right in. Now, all of that sounds great. One problem comes up, though. Every once in a while, we'll get somebody around the organization who's not on board. This is somebody who's not a safety proponent. They're not an advocate. It's somebody that says, I'm going to buck this system because I really don't like this. We've always done it this certain way, and now we're trying to change the way we're doing it, and I don't like that. I don't want to change. A lot of people, as we know, are resistant to change. In fact, truth be known, many, if not all of us are. So when you find somebody within your organization that's unwilling to change, we do need to address that situation. When that happens, you have disciplinary action policies that are in place, and they need to be exercised. This is something that's not popular. Many people don't like to confront other people. Discipline is probably one of the most neglected policies within a safety management system. When we look at them, we often see that there is no disciplinary action taken over the last 6 to 12 months of a company's history. That is an extreme deficit to the company. It's an extreme liability to the company. So some of the reasons why companies don't take that discipline on are, again, they don't like to confront people. I've also heard, well, he's our most valuable employee. He produces more product, or she produces more product. They're so much more productive than the other person. They've been here for so long, they know all of our processes. If we let them go, it'll take forever to retrain them. Here's an analogy you need to think about. A guy shared with me years ago, he says, you've got to look at your business like it's a river. That river is flowing in a direction. There's a lot of material and water moving in a single direction. And often when you look at a river, you'll see that there's rocks in the middle of the river. What do you notice about the water as it hits that rock? Well, the obvious answer is it has to travel around it instead of going straight through it. It's got to divert and go around the obstacle. He says your organization is much the same way. Whatever it is that you're producing, whether it's a service, it's a product, it's a delivery of material, whatever it is, everything has a flow to it. If you have somebody or something in the middle of your organization that everything flows around, you need to remove it. It's got to become extinct. It's got to be eradicated so that it's taken out of the way and your organization can begin to flow again. Here's what we see more often than not. When you remove somebody like that, as painful as it seems to be, and as much as you think you can't do without them, the second you remove them, you'll have people come up to you and say, oh, thank you so much for getting rid of Jimmy. Because every day he would come to work, he had a terrible attitude. And you'll start to hear how he was usurping the authority of his supervisor, how he was speaking poorly about the safety initiatives you're putting in place, how he was bullying other employees and they just didn't want to say anything. There will be many examples of those kind of things. If you're noticing a symptom in one area, chances are it's in other areas as well. And you do yourself and all of your workers a favor when you remove somebody like this from the workplace. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about these problematic situations. Now, there are rare occasions where when you're building your safety team or your safety leadership team, you might have an employee who's been there for a long time and is somewhat vocal about a lack of commitment on the company's part where it comes to their safety. We had an example of this. We began a program like this with a very large electrical contractor here in Chicago. First time we went in to do one of their meetings, we pulled up in the parking lot and this guy got out of the car and the first question he had is, who are you guys? And we said, well, we're your safety consultants. We're here to help build safety culture. And he says, don't get too comfortable. The last guy didn't last too long either. That gives you a warm fuzzy, right, where as you're walking into the first meeting. So we engaged him in a conversation on his way into the building. And he says, you know, I've been telling these guys for years that we need portable GFCI cords to do our work with. And they won't give them to us. You know, they want us to be safe and do all this stuff and, you know, work at whatever plants we're working at, big car manufacturers and so on. And we're supposed to be all safe, but we don't have the equipment we need. So we just kind of banked that as we walked in the front door, walked up to the operations manager and asked her who this guy was. She says, oh, that's Ray. Don't worry about him. And I said, no, tell me the story. And she told me the story about how he just kind of grumbles. And I said, well, we need him on our safety leadership team. And she looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, no, we need him on our leadership team. And the first recommendation that Ray makes, we're going to give it to him, as long as it's not crazy. And what happened was they did that. They put him on the leadership team. First meeting he came in, first thing out of his mouth, he told the same story again. And we said, you know, we've been thinking about that ever since we talked about it. We're going to go ahead and get that taken care of for you. The following week, there were cartons of GFCI outlet pigtail cords on their dock. They all got shipped out to the crews. Every one of the crews knew, because Ray told them, obviously, who made the suggestion and how they got them. And Ray was the hero around the company. So Ray is now the biggest advocate for safety at this contracting firm. It's a great story, and it's a great example of how you draw people in that are on the fringe, use a little bit of psychology, help it be their process, help them be part of it, and speak into it. And when they do that, they begin to take ownership of it. So don't be afraid to bring the boisterous ones in, because if you can win them over, they win the rest of the war for you. Really an important principle. Don't be afraid of your team members, right? So when it comes to team members, we want to talk now about selection and training. I mentioned earlier that if you bring somebody into this role as your safety manager or director, you want to make sure that they're properly trained. Well, that also goes to several other areas of this program as well. So we want to talk about safety professionals. When you are looking for a safety professional or your safety subject matter expert to work within your organization in this team approach, size of the organization is obviously going to become a factor. A good safety professional, degreed or certified, with a benefits package and so on is going to run the company somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000 a year with their benefits package. It's just the way it goes. That's by the time you add the salary and the work comp and the vacations and the benefits, insurance and all, that's what it totals up to. Neither here nor there, that's just what it is. Now, some organizations can afford that. They can have an internal safety professional who's dedicated. That's all they're going to do is work on safety. If that's the case, you've got your resource internally, but you need to make sure that if you're putting that person in that place, that they're either degreed or certified, or they've got a lot of experience from outside, or they're retrained from another role. So a lot of times we see people bring, this happens quite often, an injured worker from an operations role that can no longer return to work because of his work restrictions, can't return to work in the production environment. They bring him in and they make him the safety director. The problem is they have no training. It's much like with your crews. We often joke, we say, you know, what do you call the best man in a crew? Obviously, he's the foreman. And then what do you call the best foreman in the company? Well, he's the next supervisor. And then with contracting environments, it happens often. What do you call the best supervisor? Well, he's the owner of the next contracting firm that starts up. And we just kind of evolve into these different roles. The problem is often we're not retrained for that role. So if you're going to have an internal dedicated pro, make sure that they have the proper training. A lot of times what we see is we'll move people from one role and give them another role in addition, not move them into it dedicated, but they'll be a multi-role safety person. This might be an HR professional, somebody that's running our HR program. We see this often. They're given another hat to wear, and now they're managing the HAZCOM program and the forklift program. And that's all they know to manage. Now, there's some HR professionals that know how to completely manage a safety program, but oftentimes we see this as the two programs that get managed. Lockout tagout is very scant as far as the way it's run. Confined space entry is not even a consideration. We get into crane operations, it's never even been discussed. So you've got to make sure that if you're going to bring your HR person, your QC person, operations, any other department with a part-time availability into this role, they must have some training. And again, this is not just an OSHA 30. That's a good place to start, but it's not the end. So OSHA 30-hour course, things like the National Safety Council, Advanced Safety Certificate. MSCI has a partnership with National Safety Council. That's a great training program. That's how I started my retooling from an engineering background. It's a great way to go. But you need that training. Don't kid yourself that you can analyze the workplace and see all the hazards and know how to fix them without some background and training. You're also going to need some augmentation from outside to succeed. So now we're talking about bringing outside resources in. When we talk about outside resources, we really want to be aware of what I call misaligned incentives. Misaligned incentives. So what in the world does that mean? When you bring someone in from the outside, you have a number of choices. You can bring in your loss control representative from the work comp carrier. Now, I want to be careful here. We might have a few of those folks on the line, and there are many loss control people out there that do a great job and really have a good understanding of safety controls in different environments. We need to make sure we understand, though, their title. They come with a title of loss control. So they're not there to prevent losses or stop them on your behalf. They're there to control them for the insurance carrier. The insurance carrier is owned by financial investors of some sort. The loss control is the insurance carrier's way of doing due diligence on behalf of its investors to make sure they don't have bad investments out there or risky investments that are going to cause loss to the insurance carrier. It's all numbers. It's all a numbers game. How much premium do we charge versus how much risk do we have of loss? So when you bring a loss control person into your environment, anything that they learn goes back to the carrier and gets reported back to the underwriter. They have to do that. It's part of their job. So when that gets reported back, that underwriter is now thinking risk versus reward. The more risk they understand they have, the less the reward is in the program. Your rates have to go up. It's just like having your insurance carrier for your vehicle put a camera in your car and watching you speed every day but not having a ticket or an accident. They know that you're running heavy, you're going to end up in an accident, your rates are going to go up ahead of time. We want to be careful because a lot of times loss control representatives don't understand the industry that they're looking at because they look at so many industries. They may not be specialized in steel mills or in steel service centers, and they see things that scare them, results in a bad loss control report, and now you're fighting a negative impression with your carrier. So you want to be very careful about how you handled your relationship with your work comp carrier. Also, know that there are companies out there, and probably some on the line, that have very good relationships with their carriers, and they've been with the carrier for many years. The problem is, on average, most companies only keep their insurance carrier about 3 years. They're changing them all the time. Better rates, better incentives, etc. You want to be able to do that, so being tied to your insurance carrier may not be a strategy that serves you well. In other cases, it might, but you have to be aware of these things and look at them holistically when you're shopping insurance and shopping your loss control services. Now, the other type of person that you might use as an outside resource would be your insurance broker's loss control. Again, misaligned incentives to a certain degree. A lot of people shop their insurance even at a brokerage level, so be careful there. Also, if that broker's loss control person is not being paid by you through a contract to that insurance brokerage or agency, they may not feel a lot of responsibility to really get you good results. And we see a lot of services done through insurance brokerages that are waxed on and they're very thin, and they don't have a deep cultural impact. Remember, what we're talking about here today is deep cultural impact and results. So we want to own the program. We want to know that we, as the owner of the business, own our program when it comes to safety management. If you align with somebody that's an outside consulting firm, or you bring somebody in on a part-time basis that's paid directly by the organization, their only incentive is to get your results. They can be measured, they can be held accountable, and if they don't perform for you, they can be released. So, and there's no damage to anything when that happens. You want to make sure that you can ensure their commitment and their availability to you, their client. So just some things on kind of making you an educated buyer there. It's always buyer beware. But at the same time, we want to be result focused. Anything that we do, we want to be looking at return on investment, in this case, return on safety. We say here at Optimum, we want to help you maximize your return on safety. That's what we're looking to do here. We want to maximize this return on this investment. So success is not measured by efforts, right? You can do a lot of things and never really be successful. Success is measured by results. So remember, as we build a team approach like this and wrap up a culture of safety, the results are proven. It does work. We've got to do it right. We've got to keep tweaking it. And remember, it's a long haul. This is not something we're going to do in a short term, 1 year. It takes about 3 years to build a culture like this. So don't get going 6 months and let go of it thinking it's going to work. Right? We've had clients call us after 6 months and say, hey, we're seeing great results. We'd like to get into a self-insurance program where we take on $250,000 of the first part of every claim. And we're diving over the hand grenades telling them no, because it's not locked into culture yet. You've got to get a proven track record like this client experience we're showing you here. So based on that, make sure we're hyper-focused on results. Make sure you've got a vision. Let's run a good approach. And Chris, at that point, I want to open it back up for questions. That's the bulk of the presentation, but I'm sure I've just created some questions out there with somebody.
And indeed you have. So let me start at the top.
Excellent.
We have a question about where in a company hierarchy the safety professional or safety coordinator sits, and it goes as follows. If that person isn't in a position of authority, for example, if they're not a manager, if they're not a shift foreman, how is it possible that they can still effectively hold others accountable?
Yeah, that's a great question. So depending on the organization, some organizations are going to have a very flat organization chart. That'll be the owner or a general manager or CEO, and then there'll be 50 people underneath them. Other organizations will have several layers of management in between the president or CEO and the line workers. So what we want to be careful of is that I've been in a position where organizationally I had the operations manager reporting to me as the safety director, and that was not comfortable. That was really not a good position to be in. I've also been in organizations where I've reported directly or seen safety professionals report directly to the chief operating officer, and then directly below the chief operating officer would be his operations managers or general managers or area managers for each of the different departments or divisions. That's actually an ideal situation. You want to be in a position where you're reporting sideways to or directly to the operations head, if you will, with their plant managers and so on underneath that in a larger organization. Now, if the organization is smaller, the president's very active in day-to-day, you might report into that president or the C-suite so that you can directly have a line. You might find, if you have an organization that has a president and then a VP of operations, you might be the VP of safety. And that way you're reporting directly back to the president about what's going on in operations, just like a VP of human resources would, or a VP of finance. I'm not sure that I've answered the question very effectively for who's asking, because I don't know the size of the organization, but hopefully in principle we've set them up to have an understanding.
Yeah, I think there's a perfect follow-up question to that too that's come in, and I want to make sure I phrase this properly, but it does in fact have to do with the size of an organization and span of control. So depending on the size of the organization, at what point would you consider that there would be too many employees for one safety professional to take care of or be in charge of before you need to have a second safety professional or an assistant of some sort?
Yeah, it's a great question. It depends on the way the organization is structured, right? So if they're effectively running a team approach, the span of control of the safety professional is to the supervisory level. So you're not responsible necessarily directly for the safety of every individual worker. You're responsible to training up the supervisors, which now you are being replicated through the whole organization. So you can control a much larger organization with less staff, less safety staff. That's another reason that companies really need to buy into this, because they can do a lot more with less resources. However, if you don't have good cultural influence or cultural engagement down to the line workers through their supervisors, now you need more and more safety professionals to keep watch over and holding the lower level supervisors accountable. Now, all of that is assuming a moderate size organization. You get into very large organizations, and just as a virtue of things like lockout, tagout training, and all the different forklift and crane operator training and so on, there's so many different elements to manage that having additional safety resources will be required. One of the things that we are seeing today that's helping to reduce that need is technology. The use of technology. Many of the apps that are out some of the products that we even have with mysafetyapps.com. I would encourage the attendees to take a look at that website. That's a training portal that can actually deliver and log all of your training elements. Those types of tools are now expanding the span of control of safety professionals by leveraging technology. I sense the question came, Chris, from somebody who's probably a little stressed out and is looking for a reason to go back and say, hey, I need some help. So I don't know if I just gave you that fuel. I'd be open to having a conversation with whoever that is individually, and they can feel free to contact the safety helpline. Maybe with knowing a little bit more about the organization, I could give more targeted consulting, or advice related to that particular circumstance. Chris, did I lose you?
Yeah, I'm still here, Steve. I have a follow-up.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Yeah, I have a follow-up to the first question. And I want to make sure I get this right, so bear with me here. But it's about the question we had earlier of the safety coordinator being in a position of authority. And the question that's derived from the comment we've got that just came in is about who should really be meting out, let's call it discipline instead of punishment.
Yeah.
And shouldn't that really be a human resources and a management function as opposed to a safety function?
Perfect. Yes, absolutely. We advocate for training foremen or frontline supervisors so that they are equipped to manage the people that they're leading. My funny example, or at least I think it's funny, of who do you call the best person on the crew? We call them foremen. A lot of times the best production person gets elevated into a supervisory role, and we don't train that person about disciplinary action, how to hold people accountable, how to train them, etc. Those are all necessary skills for a foreman. So your safety culture, as you're building it, can help to teach that and influence the entire organization. That'll help impact your quality control efforts. It'll impact your production efforts, etc. All of that to say, yes, the disciplinary action should be recommended by and meted out by the foreman in conjunction with their supervisory level and HR. That doesn't mean that safety shouldn't recommend disciplinary action. The role of a safety professional really should be to walk the facility, make sure things are going well. If they see a deviation to safety policy, they should pull the foreman aside, let him know what they're seeing, and have him correct it, or her. I keep saying him, but you understand, him or her. And at the same time, if it needs it, recommend disciplinary action. If that foreman fails to do that, then the safety professional should go next level and talk to the supervisor. The supervisor then should discipline both the foreman and the line worker. And consequently, the supervisor even being disciplined if they won't follow that through by a general manager or operations manager, etc. If we start at the bottom and we help that process quickly, then we don't need to go up the chain. But if there's a deviation or a lack of discipline, certainly that's how we teach people how to do it.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Another question. You mentioned in your presentation about working with your workers' comp carrier loss control department, but I also know that OSHA provides on-site consultation services. Would you recommend using OSHA's on-site services? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
Sure. Yeah, great question. Yeah, it's a tremendous resource, but like with anything, we've talked about the work comp carrier, the agency resources or brokerage resources. When we look at on-site consultation, we've got to do that in a holistic way. We've got to take in the whole view of what that means. On-site consultation can provide resources free of charge for an employer. You need to understand a couple things about it, though. Number one, if you utilize that service and they find any deficiencies, they will require you to fix them if you go a certain period of time and do not fix them, they are obligated to report those back to OSHA. It can result in a citation. So that's the downside to it. The way you control it is you can choke down the scope of what the on-site consult officer will do when they come in, or consultant, I should say. They're not officers. So when they come in, you can say, we want you to come in and do industrial hygiene testing of this area. And we oftentimes will use them for that because they're good IH samplers, and they can produce a report and tell us what the contaminants are. And then we have to fix it, though. Or you can tell them, come on in and review my forklift program or my lockout program. Just know that you've got to fix it. And whatever you do, don't say, come on in and look at my facility. Because now they go everywhere and they write a big, long report, and you've got items that you must fix timely. You can't put them on a priority list like you could with somebody like us coming in, where we can help you manage your way through that and resource it properly. The other issue is, like with loss control folks, they have to look at a lot of different environments, so they're not always specialists in a particular environment, and you may find that you don't get good advice. We've seen that at times. So be active in the process of selecting the right person, making sure they know your industry before they come in.
Okay, thanks.
Chris, we're absolutely. We're about 3 minutes before the end of the hour. Any other pressing questions, or are we okay to move on to closing?
I think you're free to move on, Steve. Thanks.
Okay, great. Absolutely. What we do want to do is we want to just thank MSCI for the opportunity to come in and present these webinars, and to be able to interact with the membership like this. As we're a member of MSCI also, we find value in being around the association, and we're trying to help the other members do the same. And I'm sure that there's many areas like this where you find value. So we just want to ask, have you found these webinars to be of value? And if you have, we'd love to hear from you, and just to hear some of the comments on what you've liked, or maybe where we can improve. And additionally, do you have ideas for a topic you'd like to see covered? We do want to hear from you. We've got some ideas on different topics that we want to cover for this coming year, but we also want to hear from the members so we can keep tweaking this and making it a better value to you. So please drop your comments to us at safetyhelpline@optimum-usa.com. We welcome hearing from you with all of that type of feedback. Additionally, we do want to make you aware, as you might be stepping into a role as a safety professional, we do have a tool that we've utilized for many of the members already, and for many people in industry. We come in and do a safety management assessment service where we evaluate 30 key performance indicators. This can actually help you to do a gap analysis within your environment so that you understand where the gaps are, and then you know what help you need to fill those gaps in. So we'd encourage you to reach out to us. We can talk about how this would work to implement something like this in your workplace, and we can even connect you with some folks that have used it already so that you get an idea of how they're valuing it as well. In the event that you have other questions still, feel free to give us a call at the Safety Helpline, and we would welcome hearing from you. You can drop us an email or send a call into us here. You'll reach either myself or one of our assistant directors of operations, and they'll be able to help you with any questions related to safety. So at this point, I just want to thank everybody for joining, and then Chris, I don't know if you have any closing statements that you'd like to make.
Just a couple things. I too want to thank everybody for being on the webinar today. Hope you got a lot of information out of it. Let us know if you have suggestions on topics for next year's webinars, or just suggestions on how to make these better for everybody. Just to remind you, you can download the slides from today's webinar by using the handouts function in GoToWebinar. You'll see it on the it's on the right-hand side of your screen on the GoToWebinar control panel. And we will be publishing a video and audio version of today's webinar in our online publication called Edge. So sometime in December, you'll be able to go to our website and download the synchronized audio and video and play it back to other folks in your company, or whatever you'd like to do with it, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that that was available. So with that, I think we'll close out for the day. Thank you, everyone. Please let us know what your thoughts are, and we'll be looking forward to seeing you on the next webinar in 2016.